day. Thank you for letting us be here. I say us because it's Harry and I, and most of you know Harry Haynes. If you don't, you need to get to know Harry Haynes, and he'll be speaking at the preacher's luncheon. What are you good at? I mean, really, really good at. What is it that you excel in doing? Now, that's not how you start a conversation with a 12-year-old, but I did. Let me try to explain, okay? My wife, Debbie, and I, we have this restaurant we like to go to on Friday nights when we can, not every Friday night. Just soup, sandwiches, salads, that sort of thing. And so we've gotten in this habit when we can on Friday nights going there. And if you know my wife, she's going to make friends wherever she goes. And so the past 6-8 months, she's become friends with the lady who's the manager there. Single mom, working 3 jobs, trying to take care of her kids, her family. Sweet lady. We began to notice on a lot of Friday nights when we go, her daughter will be over in the corner at a table, 12 years old, on her phone, playing video games or watching something, playing games, whatever. And so last Friday night, we went in and she was there. We ordered our food. We were at the table waiting for our food to come, and Debbie turns to me and says, "How would you like some company for supper?" And before I could even reply, there was a 12-year-old sitting across the table from me. And she looked at me, and I looked at her, and I looked at Debbie, and Debbie said, "Talk to her." And I thought, I'm an old man. I'm out of practice. How do you start a conversation with a 12-year-old? And so I said, "What do you like to do? What are you good at?" And guess what? She told me. She said, I like to cook. I'm going to run this restaurant one day. I'm good at art. I like to watch, I'm good at music, and I love to watch music videos. And this was strange. She said, and I'm good at making friends. I'm really, really good at making friends. And I thought, this is going good. And then without any prompting whatsoever from me, she said, but I'm terrible at math. And I thought, how strange. She's 12 years old, and already she understands that when we talk about what we do well, our strengths, she understands that there is a connection somehow to what we don't do well, our weaknesses. And the two are connected. Years in business, done hundreds of interviews. And you've been through those or will go through those, and they're so strange. I mean, you sit across the table from someone and 30 minutes to an hour, you try to figure out if they lied on their resume. Are they really as good as they say they are on that piece of paper? What's their character like? What's their work ethic like? Will they fit into the chemistry, the culture of our environment? You try to do all of that through conversation, asking questions. And one of the questions that's typically asked, what are your strengths? Man, people are good with that. They can rattle them off. Oh, I do this, and I am creative, and I'm a self-starter, and I'm organized. And then there's the obligatory follow-up question, well, what about your weaknesses? Now, here's the thing. They know it's coming, but they always stumble with it. And it's because we don't like to talk about our weaknesses. Oh, now, we love to talk about what we do well and where we separate ourselves from other people. We just don't like to talk about what we don't do well. And so we don't. We need to, but we don't. And so that's okay. Let's talk about our strengths. And in talking about our strengths, what we'll do is end up talking about our weaknesses because they are connected. Oswald Chambers said, an unchecked strength is a double weakness. He's right. Because if we're not careful, our greatest strengths can become areas where we can have our greatest failures. This is a human trait, so we see it all through Scripture. Think about Moses. In Numbers chapter 12, verse 3, the statement is made that Moses was very humble. Now, that in and of itself would be significant. But you know that verse doesn't end there. There's more to the story. Continues to say he's more humble than any man on earth. Now, Moses may be writing that, we believe, but where did that come from? Well, this is God's Word. It's inspired by God. So who's making that statement? God Himself. It's not just somebody on the street who makes that assessment. It's the only one whose opinion matters. God's. And He makes this statement about Moses. That's pretty powerful. So if we're doing an assessment of Moses, we have to put that in the plus column, right? He's humble. Check. Got it. He's really, really humble. That's a strength for him. And then we get to Numbers chapter 20. And you know what happens there. He's there, Aaron's there, there's been a conversation with God. The rebellious Israelites, God called them rebels, and Moses does too. And Moses strikes the rock instead of speaking to the rock, which is bad, he disobeys. But in the statement to the Israelites, his language, he equates himself to God. He makes himself equal with God. That's a sign of pride, right? And so, Peyton read for us in Psalms. Psalm 106, verses 32 and 33. They also provoked him, New American Standard says, to wrath at the waters of Meribah, so that it went hard with Moses on their account. Because they were rebellious against his spirit, he spoke rashly, some translations say harshly, with his lips. Someone who speaks rashly, who speaks harshly, who equates himself with God, that's pride. He has a strength of humility, but here in this moment, he has a weakness. What about Peter? If you're running the list of character traits for Peter, what's one that has got to be at or near the top of the list? Peter would speak up and speak out when silence would suffice. When silence was enough, he'd just say something. He would do something. And we see that over and over and over again. In Matthew chapter 14, Matthew says the other disciples in the boat in the midst of the storm were terrified and afraid. And what does Peter do? He says, Lord, if it's you, bid me to come to you. And he did. A couple of chapters later in Matthew 16, Jesus asked the disciples, who am I? And they're stumbling around. You know, some people say, he says, yeah, but who do you say that I am? And what Peter says gets an attaboy from Jesus. The great confession, we call it. And then, the upper room. Jesus tells them what's going to take place. And Peter says, oh no, Lord. Let me tell you, I can't speak for the rest of these bozos here, but I got you back. I will never leave you. I'm your guy. I'm your man. And then with every one of those statements of boldness and those actions of taking control of the situation, what happens? He gets out of the boat and he walks on the water, but he starts to drown. Jesus has to save him in Matthew 16, a few verses after he makes the great proclamation, you're the Christ, the Son of God. He rebukes Jesus, and Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. And we all know about the three denials. And there's others. So what do we do with all of this? How do we process all of this? Well, we have to understand that our greatest strengths can become our greatest weaknesses, because there are inherent downsides to strengths. We do something well, and we know we do something well, and we are confident in that, and so we just push ahead. And sometimes we operate with blinders on. And that can cause all kinds of problems. Shakespeare said, your greatest strength begets your greatest weakness. Two researchers, one from UC Berkeley and the other from Princeton, have done extensive research in this area. And what they've done is identified 4 leadership qualities or characteristics or types. And then with each of those 4 leadership types, they have identified a corresponding weakness. So I'm going to read these 4 very quickly to you, and you try to identify yourself in which one or ones of these you are. The first one is drivers. Drivers are focused on programs. They're obsessed with the product, with the program, with the solution that others are offering. They're deeply committed, and they expect others to be as well. Now, that's a good thing, isn't it? That's a strength. But there's a corresponding weakness with that. Here's the weakness. Drivers can lose sight of the bigger mission, can run over people in the process. Being driven is a good thing, but it doesn't mean we have to drive over people in the process. Here's the second one. Explorers. Explorers, are focused on problems. They love puzzles. They love complex situations. They thrive on bringing order out of chaos. And that's a strength. That's a great thing. There's a weakness. Explorers' attraction to solving problems can cause them to solve problems that aren't really problems that have already been solved because they want to solve that problem. The third one is crusaders. Crusaders are focused on the mission, and we love crusaders. Crusaders can rally people around a cause or an outcome or an objective, and we'll follow crusaders. That's great. That's wonderful. Except that crusaders can overlook competence in the process. All they care is about getting the mission, the crusade done. And anybody who's in is in, and they're on the team whether or not they've got corresponding skill set that's going to help achieve that goal or not. And then the fourth one is captains. Captains are focused first on people. And they're not self-absorbed. They zero in on engaging and involving people. And that's a great thing. We need that. But here's the weakness. They're so engaged in involving people that they'll bring people on who can't help. So as long as you're willing to do something, you're in. And they're too easy to delegate things, and not ensuring that that's going to help the team be successful. So what do we deal with this? How do we deal with it? What do we do with it? David Baker, the great teacher. I love David. I've stolen a lot of things from David, but one of the things I like from him is at the end of a class, he'll say, "All right, class, what's your one takeaway? What's the one thing that you can do with this and apply it to your life?" And so I think for us, the one takeaway is that we have to know ourselves. We have to know our strengths. It's important that we know our strengths because that will help us then recognize, okay, maybe those are areas where I might have possibility, I might have problems. There's the possibility of a weakness there if I don't check that, if I don't watch that. Excuse me, we need to take heed lest we also likewise fall. Rod and I knew a man who served over 40 years as an elder, Horace. He's a good man. Recently went to be with the Lord. I remember so much about Horace, but one of the things I remember is so often at the end of his prayers he would say, "And Lord, help us to do all the good we can and no harm at all." I know that in ministry we want to do good and we want to do no harm at all. And to do that, we need to know ourselves. We need to know what we do well, and we need to watch ourselves. What are you good at? Use it for God's glory, but let's be careful too. God bless you.